In February of 1920, police officers in Berlin responded to a routine call about a young woman who had attempted to take her own life by jumping from a bridge into a canal. She survived the fall but refused to identify herself. At the hospital, she remained silent, distant, and unwilling to cooperate with anyone who tried to help her. Nurses described her as withdrawn, bruised, and physically exhausted. She carried no documents, no personal belongings, and offered no explanation for why she had been on the bridge. She became known simply as Fräulein Unbekannt, Miss Unknown. For months, doctors, police officers, and social workers attempted to learn her true identity. She was placed in a psychiatric facility, where she remained quiet but observant. Her appearance was noted as unusual: high cheekbones, gray-blue eyes, and a distinctive shape of the jawline. Some staff remarked that she looked familiar, but no one could place where they had seen such features before. Then, nearly 2 years after she had been admitted, a fellow patient made a bold claim. The mysterious woman looked exactly like Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanova, the youngest daughter of the last Tsar of Russia, believed to have been executed along with her family during the 1918 massacre in Ekaterinburg. At the time, rumors surrounding the Romanov execution were widespread. Many people refused to believe that all members of the imperial family had been killed. Talk of survivors circulated across Europe, and Anastasia, the most charismatic and recognizable of the Tsar's daughters, became the center of countless conspiracy theories. The idea that a Romanov child had escaped became a powerful fantasy for monarchists, exiles, and people traumatized by the collapse of the Russian Empire. When hospital staff heard the comparison, they examined the woman more closely. Her scars, her silence, her foreign accent, all of it seemed to align, at least superficially, with the idea that she might be Russian nobility hiding from her past. In 1922, after prolonged pressure, the woman finally spoke. She claimed she was indeed Anastasia Romanova, the missing Grand Duchess. Her real name, she said, was Anastasia Nikolaevna. She insisted she had escaped the execution after being rescued by a sympathetic guard. According to her, she had fled Russia, suffered tremendous trauma, and lost her family forever. The claim spread quickly across Europe. Former members of the Russian aristocracy traveled to Germany to see her. Some were convinced immediately. They said her mannerisms, posture, and small personal habits were identical to Anastasia's. Her facial features were compared to photographs. Supporters pointed to details they believed no one could fabricate. The way she wrote certain letters, the way she held her hands, her shy but abrupt tone of speaking. Others, however, rejected the idea outright. They believed she was an impostor, a woman suffering from trauma who had adopted the identity of someone else, willingly or not. Skeptics argued that her Russian was poor, her historical memory was inconsistent, and her accent was not aristocratic. Despite the doubts, the woman gained powerful supporters. Wealthy monarchists provided her financial assistance. She moved into private homes. She was introduced at social gatherings. People who had once dined with the Romanovs were divided, some swore they recognized her, while others insisted she was a fraud. By the mid-1920s, the case had become a full international controversy. Newspapers printed her story with dramatic headlines. The Lost Grand Duchess Found. Survivor of the Romanov Massacre. And the woman at the center of it all, who now called herself Anna Anderson, held firmly to her claim. She refused alternative identities proposed by investigators. She insisted she was the rightful heir to a life taken from her. But behind the public, throughout the late 1920s and into the 1930s, Anna Anderson's claim to be Grand Duchess Anastasia evolved from a hospital curiosity into a full-scale international dispute. Her life became a constant negotiation between supporters who passionately believed she was the Tsar's surviving daughter and critics who were equally convinced she was a fraud. The two sides clashed in courtrooms, in newspapers, and in private letters that would later become key historical documents. From the beginning, Anna received support from several influential figures among the Russian émigrés. These individuals were not casual believers, they had personally known members of the Romanov family. Some had worked in the imperial household. Others had served the Tsar in government, military, or ceremonial roles. They pointed to details in Anna's behavior that seemed too specific to be fabricated, the way she bowed her head, her handwriting, her private recollections of palace interiors. Supporters claimed these details matched what only someone raised inside the Winter Palace would know. One of the earliest and most vocal believers was Baroness Sophie Buxhoeden, a former lady-in-waiting to the Empress. Initially, she supported Anna, but after spending time with her, she changed her position dramatically. The shift became public, fueling a battle between experts who argued Anna was genuine and those who accused her of manipulating sympathies. Investigators soon learned that Anna knew some facts about the Romanovs, but she also made mistakes. There were inconsistencies in her stories. Her grasp of Russian was limited, and her accent was not that of an educated aristocrat. She sometimes misidentified people or confused key events. Yet, supporters countered that trauma could easily explain gaps in memory, especially for someone who had survived a violent execution attempt and lived through years of displacement. During the 1930s, Anna's claim reached American newspapers, sparking fascination across the Atlantic. Monarchists in Europe raised funds for her. She moved between households, sometimes treated with respect and admiration, other times with suspicion and hostility. She found both allies and enemies in nearly every setting she entered. In 1938, after years of disputes, a German court case was launched to determine whether Anna Anderson was indeed the rightful heir of the Romanov family and entitled to any remaining inheritance. The trial stretched on for decades, becoming one of the longest-running identity cases in European legal history. Lawyers on both sides presented witnesses, photographs, expert testimony, handwriting comparisons, and psychological evaluations. As the case progressed, it became clear that a definitive resolution was not easy. Anna herself resisted cooperation. She frequently changed residences, avoided interviews, and clashed with people who attempted to probe too deeply into her past. Her temperament was unpredictable. Some described her as intelligent but guarded. Others found her demanding, confrontational, or manipulative. Her behavior complicated the efforts of those trying to help her. Supporters argued that her mistrust came from years of trauma. Critics argued it was a tactic to avoid exposure. Meanwhile, a competing theory emerged, that Anna Anderson was actually a Polish factory worker named Franziska Szankowska, who had disappeared after suffering a traumatic incident and who bore a documented resemblance to Anna. This theory gained traction when relatives of Szankowska claimed to recognize Anna as Franziska. They pointed to a factory accident that had caused extensive injuries, potentially explaining some of Anna's scars. Anna vehemently rejected this identification. She insisted that the name Franziska was unfamiliar to her and argued that such claims were attempts to discredit her story. Her supporters dismissed the theory as speculative, relying on incomplete evidence and unreliable testimony. At the same time, detractors believed it was the only explanation that made sense. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, Anna lived in Germany, Denmark, and eventually the United States. She was briefly institutionalized, underwent multiple psychological evaluations, and continued to oscillate between periods of calm and hostility. Reporters continued to track her movements, interviewing friends, family members, and legal representatives. Her life had become a public mystery. By the 1960s, the Romanov identity debate had entered a cultural mythos. By the late 1970s, Anna Anderson's claim to be Grand Duchess Anastasia had already spanned more than half a century. She had lived in multiple countries, moved between supporters and skeptics, and become the subject of books, films, documentaries, and academic studies. Her life was defined by a single unresolved question: was she truly the last surviving daughter of the Russian Tsar? When she married an American professor and moved to the United States, she continued to attract attention from reporters and historians. Aging and increasingly frail, she rarely appeared in public, but her name remained one of the most recognizable in modern identity disputes. For many people, she was the only possible surviving Romanov, the living link to a dynasty swept away by revolution. For others, she was a deeply traumatized woman who had adopted a story powerful enough to redefine her entire existence. In 1984, Anna Anderson died in Charlottesville, Virginia. Her death did not resolve the controversy. Her supporters insisted that her true identity remained intact and that history would eventually vindicate her. Critics argued that the case died with her and that it would never be possible to settle the matter with certainty. At the time, both sides were right. No legal or scientific method existed to bring closure. But within a decade, everything changed. In the early 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian authorities located the remains believed to belong to the Romanov family. The discovery triggered renewed global interest. For the first time, modern forensic science could be used to answer the question that had haunted historians for generations. DNA analysis, a field still in its infancy, offered a possibility that had never existed before: a definitive genetic comparison. Investigators obtained tissue samples from Anna Anderson that had been preserved during medical procedures years earlier. These samples were compared to DNA from living Romanov relatives. The process was meticulous, requiring international coordination, historical validation, and laboratory procedures far more advanced than anything available during Anna's lifetime. When the results were announced, the conclusion was clear and scientifically undisputed. Anna Anderson was not related to the Romanov family. Her DNA showed no genetic connection to Tsar Nicholas II, the Empress, or their children. Instead, the analysis revealed a match with a Polish family whose missing daughter, Franziska Shanskowska, had disappeared around the same time Anna first appeared in Berlin. The match was so precise that forensic scientists considered the identification conclusive. According to the genetic evidence, Anna Anderson was almost certainly Franziska, a factory worker who suffered severe injuries and psychological trauma before vanishing from public records. For many, this revelation ended the debate. But for Anna's devoted supporters, the results were not enough. They argued that contamination, political agendas, or flawed sampling could have influenced the outcome. The controversy did not disappear completely, but for historians, scientists, and legal scholars, the mystery was resolved. The German court, which had spent decades reviewing Anna's claim, issued a final statement: there was no legal basis to recognize her as Anastasia Romanova. The court acknowledged the emotional weight of the case but stated that neither documentation nor science supported her story. Yet the scientific answer did not erase the cultural legacy she left behind. For more than 60 years, Anna Anderson's life captured the world's imagination. She became a symbol of unresolved identity, trauma, and the human need to belong to a story larger than oneself. Her claim survived world wars, political collapse, migration crises, and dramatic shifts in scientific capability. She influenced literature, film, and public memory, to the point where many people today still associate the name Anastasia with the possibility of survival. Her supporters believed she was a wronged royal. Her critics believed she was a troubled woman who found refuge in a powerful narrative. Psychologists saw in her case a study of identity formation under extreme trauma. Legal scholars examined her as an example of how courts struggle to adjudicate truth when evidence is fragmented. And historians continue to debate what motivated her. Was it delusion? Was it intentional deception? Or was it a desperate attempt to escape a past she no longer wished to claim? No final psychological explanation exists. What remains is a life shaped entirely by uncertainty, a woman who stepped into a hospital in Berlin in 1920 with no documents, no name, and no past, and emerged as the center of one of the most debated identity mysteries of the 20th century. Today, Anna Anderson's story is remembered not because she was Anastasia, but because she convinced so many people that she might be. And in the long history of human identity, there are few cases where a single unanswered question held the world's attention for so many decades. Her life ended in Virginia. Her mystery ended in a laboratory. But her legend continues, as one of the most unusual human stories ever recorded.